Greetings, Dr. Mark Winton here from the University of Central Florida Department of Criminal Justice, and here I will present part 3 of the presentation on bystanders and the Holocaust. I'll start by talking about a book called Into the Tunnel. This book is written by Goetz Ali and published in 2004, and I've read this book several times, and it's a pretty amazing book. It's titled Into the Tunnel, The Brief Life of Marion Samuel, 1931 to 1943. And what this book does is it connects the individual and the family to the larger social structures and organizations that participated and made the Holocaust possible. After Goetz Ali won the Marion Samuel Prize for Historical Research, he decided that he would research the life of Marion Samuel and find out more about her and what happened. So we have a case study that's detailed and provides a great deal of information and knowledge about the Holocaust, while at the same time providing a model of historical research. So this is an excellent teaching tool on multiple accounts. It can be used for a variety of ways if you are using it in the classroom. So Marion was born July 27th, 1931 in Arnswald, Germany, to Ernst and Silly. What I've done is I've kind of taken a timeline and looked at events that that Ali reported in the book. But what I'd like to do is make the connections to the larger social structures, and we'll see that throughout the entire story. So in 1933, really not much is reported in the book, but by 1934, we see the boycott of Jewish businesses and also vandalism to Jewish stores. And the Samuel family sold their store to the bank. And so already in 1934, we can see that bystanders are all around. People are boycotting. There's vandalism. A bank is buying a family store. And so you can see they're all starting these the financial industry there is participating. The community members are participating. And by 1935, there's widespread anti-Semitism in her town. And in 1938, Jewish students had to leave the public schools. So there we see the educational system participating. The family was threatened and their possessions were taken by officials in the town. The synagogue was burned down and Jewish men were arrested and sent to a concentration camp. By 1939, Jewish individuals had to have the middle name Israel and Sarah, depending on male or female, and this was also put on identity cards that were issued. So already you're seeing that all these administrators who ran these programs to produce the identity cards and to verify if someone was Jewish or not. And so we see that occurring here as well, and the legal system creating these policies, and the criminal justice system enforcing them. In 1938, in another town where relatives lived, a middle school teacher brought his Hitler Youth students into the community to break windows at a Jewish store. And the Hitler Youth also humiliated an elderly man. So here we see the educational system in a way that is creating the Nazi ideology or passing and socializing youngsters to take on a role of becoming a Nazi. It was reported that most of the townspeople either kept to themselves or just looked away. And so you had a town of bystanders in this case. In 1935, we see the Nuremberg racial laws. So again, the justice system, the legal system participating, the political system, and all those who enforced those racial laws. We also see Ernst, Silly, and Marion moving to Berlin after they sold their store because it was less danger in the larger cities at that time. And Ernst opened a cigar shop, but that probably didn't last long. And Marion attended a Jewish school. By 1941, Ernst was forced to work in Daimler-Benz, a plant that paid him very low wages, taxed him in a high level, and didn't provide benefits. So there you have an organization, Daimler-Benz, participating in the Holocaust. Silly was forced to work at Blaupunkt, and the workers were threatened to be sent to concentration camps if they didn't produce. And so their Blaupunkt facility, and those names probably sound familiar to you as you start putting the pieces together of how all these groups not only were bystanders, but were actually active participants. By 1942, Jewish children were not allowed to attend school anymore. So again, the educational system. By 1943, February 27th, Ernst, Silly, and Marion were arrested by the Berlin police. And so there you have law enforcement participating in the Holocaust. And in 1943, March 1st, Silly was deported to Auschwitz by train, and Ernst and Marion were deported to Auschwitz on March 3rd. And there you have the railroads. You have all these interlocking systems that made up the groups that participated and orchestrated the genocide. And Ernst had to account for his property that would be distributed by the Nazis to non-Jewish families in the community. After they arrived at Auschwitz, they were selected for either work or to be killed in the gas chambers, often by doctors, by physicians. So there you have the whole medical system coming into play. And those who weren't killed went to work at the IG Farben factory. Again, organization, big corporate organizations participating. Silly may have survived for a short time, but Ernst died on May 4th, 1943, with some data provided by the Red Cross Tracing Service. And on March 4th, 1943, Marion Samuel, age 11, was sent to the gas chamber. The next day, a larger crematoria was tested that was built by Topf and Schoen. And that is a case study, the Oven Builders, who I have as a case study in the appendix of an organization that had a very highly influential impact and role carrying out the genocide. The author describes the bystanders as passive. And in 2003, Ali received a letter from one of Marion's classmates. And she reported that Marion told her during that time that, quote, people go into a tunnel in the mountain, and along the way there is a great hole, and they fall in and disappear, end of quote. We also see the impact on the family system interacting again with the legal system. For example, one Christian family member in the family was encouraged to divorce his Jewish wife, but he didn't. And so they had a privileged mixed marriage, but their children were still harassed at school. Another family member, a female teenager, was forced to work at Siemens Cable Work. That name should be familiar as well. Related family was able to emigrate to the United States with guarantee of support. So it was extremely difficult for Jewish families to find places to live and to emigrate out of Germany at the time. And one 14-year-old, Michael Week, reported, quote, "Former fellow citizens, patients, customers, friends, or neighbors stood idly by and watched or turned away," end of quote. Let me read that again since I misread it the first time. Quote, "Former fellow citizens, patients, customers, friends, or neighbors stood idly by and watched or turned away," end of quote. So I think this book provides us a link of all these larger scale institutions and how they all interacted to support the Nazi program, to support the Holocaust, to support the genocide. Another case of interest are the railroads. And when you think about the impact that the railroads had on carrying out the Holocaust, and in an article by Hilberg focusing on the railroads, Professor Hilberg talks about how the railroads facilitated the killings and the reactions of those that worked in that system. So the Reichsbahn, the German railroads, facilitated the Holocaust and were part of the core, according to Hilberg. Hilberg states, "The Jews were booked as people and shipped as cattle," end of quote. And it was all about business, with ordinary employees carrying out their regular everyday work tasks. Freight cars were packed and were slow due to wait, and Red Cross ladies provided hot soup to the police around the train. Railroad workers did not refuse to carry out the transport, nor did they resign. They could see what was going on. They knew what was going on. And afterward, the railroad changed their name and just continued without prosecution for their crimes. Mierzejewski, in 2001, in a chapter in a book on the Holocaust, discusses how the railroaders were indifferent. They didn't want to get involved in politics. They joined the Nazi Party. They discriminated against Jews, and they had different forms of participation. Support for building and operating the camps, the concentration camps, transporting victims, and also the financial aspects. One railroad official refused to visit the concentration camp as he was worried he might see his Jewish friends. So Mierzejewski talks about this in the chapter. They saw violence on the ramps and the conditions inside the cattle cars, and the railroad officials just said they were doing their jobs. They didn't want to risk any impact on their careers. And Mierzejewski states that there were only 2 known cases of railroad men who asked for transfers and their careers were not affected. So there you have the organizational features looking at the railroad system. And I'm going to wrap up this video here, and in part 4 we'll continue our discussion.